Zizek's essay Looking Awry presents an interesting and challenging idea. Human desire is not simple or direct. We do not just want things because they exist in reality. Instead, our desires are shaped by fantasy and by the way we look at the world. Zizek builds this idea using the psychoanalytic theory of Lacan, who argues that desire is always connected to something missing or incomplete. The object we desire is not a solid, clear thing that exists out there in the world. It is something that becomes meaningful only because how we see it. In reality, this object is empty or unclear, but when we look at it through our imagination and fantasy, it appears attractive and important. In simple terms, we do not desire things as they really are, we desire them because of the meaning we give to them. To explain this idea, Zizek uses a story by Patricia Highsmith, Black House. In this story, a group of men are deeply fascinated by an old abandoned house. For them, this house is not just a building, it is connected to their past, especially their youthful experiences, desires, and even forbidden memories. Over time, the house becomes a powerful symbol in their minds. However, when a newcomer visits the house, he sees it very differently. To him, it is nothing more than a dirty, broken ruin with no special meaning. He proves this to the others, showing that the house is just an ordinary, unpleasant place. Instead of accepting this truth, the men become extremely angry and eventually kill him. Their reaction may seem shocking, but Zizek explains that it happens because the newcomer destroys their fantasy space. The house was important not because of what it really was, but because of what it allowed them to imagine and feel. This example helps Zizek explain Lacan's idea of the object petita, which means the object cause of desire. This object is not something real or complete, it is more like a gap or even empty space. But even though it is nothing in reality, it has a powerful effect on our minds. It shapes our desires, emotions, and actions. Once this object is shown to be empty, as in the story, the whole structure of desire collapses and people may react strongly or even violently. Zizek explains how something empty can appear meaningful. He uses the concept of anamorphosis from visual art. In anamorphic art, an image looks like a strange or meaningless blur when you look at it directly. But when you look at it from a different angle, it suddenly becomes clear and recognizable. This idea helps Zizek explain how desire works. He connects this idea to Richard II and says that there are two ways of seeing things. The first way is a direct, objective look. When we look at something in this way, we see it as it really is. From this perspective, the object of desire appears empty or uninteresting. The second way is an indirect or distorted look, shaped by our emotions and desires. From this angle, the same object suddenly becomes fascinating and meaningful. This may sound strange, but Zizek argues that this distorted way of seeing is actually necessary. Human beings cannot live by seeing reality in a completely objective way. Language and thought create a gap in our understanding of the world, and we fill this gap with fantasy. If we were forced to see reality without any distortion, we would come face to face with emptiness, which could be psychologically disturbing. Zizek explores this idea further through cinema. He first looks at pornography and argues that it does not work well in terms of desire. This is because pornography tries to show everything directly and clearly. There is no mystery, no hidden element, and no need for imagination. Because of this, the viewer does not feel a strong sense of desire. Instead, the experience becomes flat and uninteresting. By showing too much pornography removes the very thing that makes desire possible, the unknown or hidden aspect. In contrast, Zizek discusses nostalgic cinema, especially film noir. We do not enjoy these films only because of their stories or characters. We are also fascinated by how people in the past might have experienced them. When we watch such films, we imagine the perspective of earlier audiences who believed in and were deeply moved by them. For example, films like Body Heat or The Driver are often seen as modern recreations of older styles. When we watch them, we are not just seeing the film itself, we are also seeing it through the eyes of the past. This creates a distance between us and the film, and this distance allows desire to grow. In other words, we are looking Awry at the present by using a different perspective, and this makes the experience more enjoyable and meaningful. Zizek's most detailed discussion is about the films of Hitchcock. He believes that Hitchcock is a master at showing how ordinary objects can become mysterious and powerful. In movies like Psycho, simple things like a house or a room suddenly feel strange and frightening. Hitchcock achieves this effect through his filming technique. He often shows a character looking at something and then shows what the character sees. This creates a connection between the viewer and the character's perspective. Hitchcock avoids showing the object in a neutral or purely objective way. Instead, the object is always linked to the character's emotions and viewpoint. Because of this, even a normal object can take on a special meaning. It becomes an anamorphic spot, something that stands out and feels important. Even though it may be ordinary in reality, this technique allows Hitchcock to turn simple scenes into moments of tension, fear, and desire. Finally, Zizek discusses the figure of the female fatale, a common character in film noir. She is often shown as mysterious, attractive, and dangerous. Her power comes from the fact that she seems to hide something unknown. This hidden quality makes her desirable. Zizek argues that this mystery is actually covering a kind of emptiness. When the mask is removed and her true nature is revealed, she no longer appears as a fascinating object of desire. Instead, she becomes a subject who represents a deeper, more disturbing force, which Zizek connects to the idea of the death drive. At this point, the male character in the story faces a difficult choice. He can either step back and give up his desire, returning to a normal life, or he can follow the woman into a dangerous and destructive path. This shows how desire can lead people toward both meaning and self destruction. Zizek's main idea in looking Ori is that desire depends on fantasy and perspective. The things we desire are not truly valuable or meaningful in themselves. They become important because of how we see them. By looking Ori or from a different angle, we turn emptiness into something rich and fascinating. Without this process, the world would seem empty and difficult to bear.